As with all the generative apps, when you first launch it, it may take a while to open up. Be patient. And you'll find PixelGrid with the other generative apps inside my public folder. If you don't know how to access that, watch the second video on Halloween's Daily Quest, October 31st. That Daily Quest, the second video, shows you how to use it. So when you launch PixelGrid, and I already had it launched so you don't have to watch a gray screen for 20 seconds or so, you're given these choices. Hey, what color do you want it? It only works with one color. So, you pick some color and say okay. And then, what size pixels do you want? How about the border? What does all this mean? If I hit the right arrow, that's what it means. With these current settings, that's what PixelGrid generates. And can you make anything interesting from this? Of course you can. It takes some effort. So you start setting up what you want. Pixel rotation. What if we rotate these a little bit? And what if we vary the rotation? We'll leave the sizes the same. But what about the stroke? What does that do? I don't really like the stroke because it's black. And you go like this and say, that's just not interesting. What rotation variance? What if we drag it all up? There we get a little bit. So let's lower this down because that seems like a little much. And so there's some visual interest, a little bit. Hit the up arrow to save. Again, left arrow gives you the controls. Right arrow generates a new image, and the up arrow saves a PDF. Now if we head back over to the Finder and open up a new Finder window, wherever you put this, and I told you to put it in your Documents folder, you should have a PixelGrid folder, and in there there'll be a Data folder with an Images folder inside, and that is where your PDFs are. All of this begins, you can drag it onto Photoshop, but I'm telling you, it begins in Illustrator. And there we go. And like all of these, when you click, you get the clipping mask. You right click and release the clipping mask, and you see that reveals extra little rectangle squares. And you want to get on this line to get rid of, there it is, to get rid of the clipping mask. So now you can select individual squares. And what you want to do to start with is, what size do you want this? Let's go ahead, you could select and trim out and say, I really don't want these guys. And I'm just hitting delete after I select these and say, okay, this is what I want to start with. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And yes, we could go in, I've already copied it, so from this point, and again, the gotcha, you have to save as, Shift-Command-S, to save out the Illustrator version. So I'm going to hit the right arrow, add the A there like I always do, and then change this to Illustrator like I try to always do. And every once in a while I forget, and that's not something you want to do, because now those other, if you would save this as a PDF, those other squares would be lost forever. So now, before we leave this, I just want to show you this. Here are all the different colors, and you might say, hey, these are all the same. Well, this is opacity shifts, and what does this do? Randomly change the color order. There's one thing. What does this do? The saturation and brightness. Hey, that's kind of cool. There's no undo in this dialog box. So typically what I do, if I find something that looks kind of cool, I'll say okay, and then duplicate this layer. And then I can hide that layer. And so that one's preserved, and I can go ahead and experiment some more. But for right now, I like this better than what we had originally. So I'm going to copy this and then come over to Photoshop and open up a new Photoshop file. Hey, look, PixelGrid. Command in. And this is going to say, hey, this is how big it is. Okay, I want this bigger though. So say 2500 pixels square. And you can set this up on your own. And then Command V. And I'm going to paste this in as a smart object. Comes in on its own layer. And then hit Command minus just so I can see a little better. And I'm going to go ahead and hold down Option and drag from this outer corner. Now in the new version of Photoshop, you don't want to hold down Shift, because Shift, rather than constraining proportions, actually, boom, that's good. I'm going to hit return. Actually allows you to deform. So by default, Photoshop constrains the proportions. Can you believe that? So fabulous. Now right now this thing's not named. If we save this, we go, well, I can see PixelGrid here. You should have your images folder from PixelGrid should be the top one in your recents. So you come down here, click on that AI file so you inherit that name, that 17A, and then you have to, Photoshop's not as smart as Illustrator. Illustrator will keep its extension. Photoshop, boom, you have to click on PSD. You can't just type it in. That does not work. And now you save it, and now you have your PDF, your AI, and your PSD, all your Acrobat file, your Illustrator file, your Photoshop file, all together in the same directory, which is where you want them. And the naming conventions matter. I'm telling you, this matters.